So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is indeed Matthew Xuereb. I'm a policy officer in the microelectronics and photonics industry unit within DG Connect, within the European Commission. And my presentation will be focused on two key areas. So I'll start off with an overview of the European Chips Act. Some of you might have heard of it, I hope. And then we'll go into how the European Commission sees RISC-V, our strategy on RISC-V, which actually Patrick Pipe before me already presented, and how the next actions we foresee within this field. So I'll start off with a rationale. How did we get here? Semiconductors have become political now, so people like me end up in these sort of places talking about these sort of things. And I'm surprised, opening up the news, the Financial Times, you always see, for example, semiconductors always on the front pages. I don't think it was always like this, but this is the world we're currently in. So what was our rationale? An uncertain geopolitical landscape. I think we're seeing certain movements right now that things are different. They're not what they used to be. There was a chip shortage that affected a lot of other industrial verticals across Europe, and we saw the effects of that during the pandemic and so on. And of course, a digital transformation, which is a key priority of this commission, of this mandate of the commission, which of course we are addressing in DG Connect, and which is something where we lead in. And therefore, there was a need for public support to industry for R&D. However, not R&D alone, but together with serious industrial policy. And therefore, the CHIPS Act involves bringing together union programs, Horizon, Digital Europe, member state support through state aid, industry's contribution. We cannot, of course, do it all alone, RTOs and academia, as well as our international partners across the world. And a key question, well, we've been trying to tackle Europe's problem with our dependency in semiconductors and so on for quite some time. And what's different in our approach, and why do we think that this time we can be successful? Well, the focus before was primarily on R&D. That basically is because of the structure of the union's programs and so on. So basically Horizon Europe projects, and then some support also through our policy. There was what we believe was below critical mass investment, dispersed policy initiatives amongst member states with no policy framework, and a limited common European infrastructure. We saw actions happening mostly at the member state level, but not at a common European level. And now, post-CHIPS Act, what do we have different now? Well, the R&D support is also focused on industrialization and capacity building. The public investment is reinforced. The CHIPS Act is a 43 billion euro package, includes over 30 billion in manufacturing capacity, state aid support. We're already seeing the results of that with some announcements, but we expect further. We had this important projects of common European interest. We expect an announcement there soon, and hopefully, and not hopefully actually, I'm sure that there are some also RISC-V projects in that forum as well. There is now a synchronized pan-European approach that allows for complementarity across the Union. We're seeing what our strengths are in each member state and building on each other's strengths together going forward. And there is a clear industrial policy for semiconductors that builds on strengths, but also dares to venture into new domains. And this is maybe, for some of you who've been following the CHIPS Act, this is a slide that we use commonly, and I always try to keep it here because I think it really explains how we're structuring this legislative package. Because, well, in Pillar 1, we have the Chips for Europe initiative, which I will be focusing on in this presentation, particularly the design platform that we foresee there in supporting SMEs and startups. Here we want to establish large-scale Europe-wide capacity building in terms of pilot lines, in terms of design platform, in terms of competence centers, in terms of skills initiatives, and also supporting startups and SMEs to go through that valley of death to get to industrialization as well. Then Pillar 2 is more based on security of supply. This is where member states come in. This is where we reinterpreted, reformed our state aid rules for semiconductors, and where member states can provide more support to bring more investment to Europe to increase our manufacturing capacity here. And then there's Pillar 3, of course, which is about monitoring and crisis response to avoid the chip shortage that we faced in these past years, but that is more of a member state coordination committee that we will be using, but also the Commission will have some powers when it comes to common purchasing and so on. But today we will be focusing on Pillar 1. By the way, of course, this has been agreed now on the 18th of April. We have an interinstitutional agreement, Parliament and Council. We are currently in the formal ratification stage, so by September we should have the CHIPS Act formally in place. So, Pillar 1, Chips for Europe initiative, the problem statement, I've already referred to this. We have not driven our excellent results in research into industrial innovation. SMEs and startups have a difficulty attracting necessary investment, particularly when it comes to venture capital and so on. And we have a limited pool of talent and a lack of a workforce with the necessary skills which we want to develop. We have the potential, but we are not exploiting that. So to get here, we have 5 objectives. The 5 objectives of Pillar 1. We want to reinforce design capacity by providing a virtual design platform, enhance existing and developing new pilot lines, accelerate the development of quantum chips. There's a small quantum component here, expand skills and set up a network of competence centers, and who knows, maybe one of the competence centers, which you foresee to have one in sort of every member state, might have more of a RISC-V flavor. Why not? And facilitate SME access to equity and loans through a dedicated chips fund. So here we will be going with venture capitalists, with union money to help support startups and SMEs. The first 4 objectives will be implemented by the CHIPS JU, which is now KDT. It will be succeeded by the CHIPS JU in November. And the 5th objective is being taken care of by the EIC, the InvestEU, as well as the European Investment Bank. So this is how it all fits together. We have users, we have who will be aided hopefully by the CHIPS Fund. We have skills initiatives also supplying those users with the workforce that they need, competence centers that will hopefully consolidate our skills and also provide access to the common European infrastructure. We have this design platform where we aim to provide EDA tools, design libraries, IP repositories, and so on, all on the cloud. And also pilot lines where we foresee that we'll be tackling technologies like, for example, going below 2 nanometer, gate-all-around, heterogeneous integration, FDSOI, a European technology. These are sort of the ideas that we have in place, but there might be others, photonics, and so on. And now I'll be going into this design platform. And what we're trying to tackle here is the issue that we have with fabless companies when it comes to designing, particularly design digital chips, particularly at the leading edge, although we aim to tackle the whole spectrum from analog to digital to up to the leading edge nodes. So costs are going up, having new players coming in is difficult, and we want to work on that, and this is how we aim to go. So again, want to reduce entry barriers and admin burden for EU companies engaging in chip design. One thing that came up in our workshops with European startups and SMEs was getting your EDA tools and licenses sometimes takes months of negotiations and so on. We want to facilitate access to this common European infrastructure of pilot lines, but also foundries. If we're going to get new manufacturing capacity, we hope that will be filled, of course, with European designs. We want to foster collaboration among EU stakeholders, also on new IP and tools, including open source, for example. Access to a network of competence centers offering training and support to boost design skills. So that is that complementarity with the competence centers as well. And the instrument that we have, of course, is this virtual design platform offering a cloud-based access to tools, libraries, and support services. What's the added value? No upfront CapEx for on-premise IT infrastructure. Those selected companies will get access to the cloud and computing infrastructure that they need to design, maximum computing scalability for simulation and verification, high level of security, of course, because we will want to deal with the foundries across the world and have the PDKs and so on hosted there. We want to have access to virtual prototyping. We'll support these companies up until multi-project wafers, and we want to have competence centers offering training and support, as already mentioned. To this end, we've brought some key players together. We've had EDA vendors, IP vendors, we've had IDMs, we've had RTOs. We've also had some companies, I see, for example, Codasip and Synopsys and so on, who are here. And together, we've come up with a sort of implementation plan of how to get there. And this is sort of our idea. So we have this central platform services where we'd have an accelerator program, for example, where we'll be selecting startups and SMEs that will provide access to the platform. But not only that, we'll provide the licenses, we'll provide the cloud resources, and so on. An IP exchange and an IP repository, hopefully also with open source IP, including RISC-V implementations. We have, as Patrick already mentioned, already 2 projects coming in, Tristan and Isolde, and we hope that also those results would be able to provide them here, but also from other initiatives. Then we have design enablement services, where we won't just give you the tools, but we'll also make sure that there are teams that are willing to support you in getting to tape out. So you'll have that customized individual support that many startups and SMEs require. And the target users here are startups and SMEs, but we also want to open this to academia. Of course, with academia, we already have a program. We have Europractice. Some of you might be familiar with that, but we want to consolidate what we already have in Europractice further. And key to this also will be the PDKs from the fabs and the pilot lines that we will be developing, and there we're also working on making sure that those are on board. So this goes into a bit more detail. So the way we see it is that every user will have their own virtual desktop. This is, of course, a very simplified version, but just to give you an idea, they'll have access to PDKs and IP from their design enablement team of choice. They'll have access to grid computing for simulation, verification, and so on. Then they'll also have licenses and open source IP, potentially, hopefully, RISC-V within this platform coordination team that will coordinate a series of design enablement teams going forward. So we aim to run EDA tools, enable emulation and simulation, and so on the grid computing, a shared virtual repository over there, and industrialization through validation and verification of IP, which we will support via this design platform. So what will we offer? Easy click-through licensing, reducing contract negotiation times. Hopefully, users in this program can just press a click and will be designing. Scalable computing resources through cloud access. So if you want to simulate now with 1,000 cores, you can hopefully be able to do that. Easy access to training, expert support, tools, and a vast IP repository. Through competitive calls, SMEs with innovative advanced designs, they'll be able to get in. And we hope to have the response, and that's why we're here to try to get you thinking about what you can start doing with this new resource that you'll have at hand. So again, we will be enabling users through choice, through various design flows, IP, design enablement, and also training. When it comes to design flows, EDA tools, we aim to have, of course, a vendor-neutral platform where anyone can put in the tools. Also, open source tools. We'll have work being done on the integration of these tools together and making sure that there are set design flows where someone can just pick and choose. Of course, if you want a customized solution, that will require more time, but you'll have something to at least start with. Open source IP will be key here. We aim also to collaborate with IP vendors that have proprietary solutions, but we really want to bolster and boost open source and the dissemination of that. Design enablement, again, each user will be accompanied by a team of experts that will help them get to tape out as quickly as possible, and also training with a wide variety of options, also leveraging on the different specializations of the competence centers. So, as Patrick already presented, we have our roadmap and recommendations on RISC-V. This is beyond now the design platform. This is an action that we've been working on now for a number of years and will now further boost now that the CHIPS Act is in place. The aims are clear, the outcomes are there. I encourage you, I've made a small link, maybe you can type it in and you'll be able to give it a read. It's on the Commission's website. And well, we'll address all these different domains, but this was already explained. And the next steps. So we had Tristan in KDT in Work Program 21, Isolde in Work Program 22. Now, in Work Programs 24 up until 27, we aim to have more projects and we aim to continue on this model and increase the investment on RISC-V. And not excluding also other initiatives that are happening beyond KDT and the CHIPS JU, like in, for example, Euro HPC and so on. So that's it. Please do get in touch. I hope that some of you are already thinking about how that you'll be able to exploit what we'll be having with the European CHIPS Act. I think it's an opportunity for all of us to move forward. And please, if you have any questions, just let me know or contact me via email. Thank you.
We do have time for small questions. Here I see a question.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have a teaching voice, so I need a mic. So thank you for the presentation. I'm from academia, and I saw that there's something about like training, and apparently the workforce is just too small. So can you comment on whether it's expected that the member state have to implement something, or are you gonna, like, is it EU is gonna do something? Like, yeah, how will it be implemented?
Hello? Okay. So in standard EU fashion, it will be both. So there will be both union activities and member state activities. We will, of course, reinforce whatever the member states are already doing, and there are already some initiatives at the member state level. We're currently in discussions within the context of the KDT and eventually CHIPS JU within its public authorities board, where the member states come together. And currently we're coming up with an action plan going forward for our skills initiatives up until 2030. So hopefully you'll be hearing more from that soon. Thank you.
Yes, there's a question in the front.
So what specifically will these competency centers actually deliver locally?
So every member state will have its own interpretation of how it is going to work. Let's be clear, we will not be, in most member states, you won't need to start new entities. We already have good RTOs in Europe that can take on that job. So the prime aim, the augmentation, the competence center part of the role will be providing access to the common European infrastructure in terms of pilot lines and design platform, but each competence center will also have its own specialization that the member state will designate according to the strengths of that member states, and there hopefully we'll be able to see an accumulation of activity that will reinforce that domain. In terms of actions as such, it will depend on the entity that will be hosting it. I think many of them already, for example, have research activities, but there can also be outreach activities, training, and so on. We also aim to have all of this in a network of competence centers. So what one member state does not have, and you have an SME that wants to work in one domain, but that member state cannot provide that, you can refer it to another competence center in another member state, and there they'll be able to get the assistance that they need. Thank you. Okay.
No, they are making me run.
It's okay. Thanks.
Hi, I've got two questions, if I may. The first question is, as you may remember, a few years ago, the UK made a very stupid decision to leave the EU. So will this initiative be available to companies, entities, organisations in the UK? My second question is, have you identified which fabs you are targeting? Thank you.
Which?
Fabs.
Fabs. Okay. So I'll start with fabs. There we're open for everyone. We'll be, of course, speaking to aggregators in Europe for certain fabs beyond the EU, but hopefully we'll also have the presence of significant companies here, and we'll be able to engage with them. Now, in terms of the UK's participation, I believe that currently there are negotiations for the UK to rejoin the Horizon Europe program. I understand that there are colleagues from mine in the GRTD who are handling that, so we'll have to see how that goes. The CHIPS Act depends on both Horizon Europe and Digital Europe. I haven't heard of talk that the United Kingdom would like to join the Digital Europe program, which is more on the capacity building side. So I guess it will be difficult for that to happen anytime soon. But definitely, of course, Europe will keep on engaging with the UK, hopefully also within the context of Horizon Europe.
Thank you.
Any other question?
I have just a question. You said that you also have equity funds for chip manufacturing. How this process will work?
So, for example, we have the EIC that has been around for a while now. There are challenges, and the startups and SMEs get funding there after they pitch to an expert committee. And then there will also be the InvestEU and the EIB coming in supporting the venture capitalists with their funding to semiconductor companies. The initiative is still at its very early stages. It's still being developed, but soon enough we'll have more information on that we'll be able to share. Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have time for one question, one or two.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. So, yeah, I had a question to the IP licensing. Like you were presenting that there are pretty much, there will be this IP pool and it will be open to small companies and so on. How is this going to be implemented? So usually IP has a certain value and companies are offering that. How do you incentivize companies to put their IP into this pool and make it available to somebody without I don't know, priorly looking at the sales numbers or whatever, which is what would usually happen?
So in terms of open source IP and so on, as in that will be made available, and IP available from European projects, that's for that scope. In terms of IP from vendors and so on, we aim to come to an agreement. We aim to support users here with a sort of voucher system. So they'll be able to also buy IP where necessary, and hopefully also leverage on open source IP where possible. Thank you.
Is there a last question before the panel?
Okay.
Okay, let's thank the
Thank you.
speaker.